Hello, good afternoon. Hope everybody's doing well. It is right at 1 o'clock, so we have people joining quickly here, and I'll get started talking so we can make your lunch hour effective. So, thank you for joining us for succession planning. I can tell this is a popular topic. We maxed out at 100 participants again, and we have people represented from 20 states and a great diversity of types of companies and people and business owners. So please participate. You should have a panel bar on your screen to the right that will give you the ability to ask questions. So you'll see a question section. And please at any time click on that and ask us a question, and we're happy to answer it. We will try to save 10 or 15 minutes for the end just for questions. But, and I see we have Thad joined us here, so he just popped up, and I'll give him the chance to talk in just a little bit. And he's my special guest star today and has a lot to say and a lot of interesting experiences that I want you guys to have the benefit of. So I will introduce him shortly. I'll give a quick introduction and then give him the floor. So we are talking about succession planning and what your opportunities are. What I like to say to people to get started with this is that most of you are business owners and you've created something. I know most of you and your companies, and you've created something very special. And whether you plan for it or not, there will be an exit out of your company. And so what the phone call that I like to get when people are ready to make a change in their company is my company's at the top of its game. We're doing great. All the ducks are in a row. We're financially healthy. We've made ourselves as strong as possible, and we're ready to consider our options. The phone call we don't like to get is, we're struggling. There's some new competition. Or I'm personally ill and I need to make a change. And, in that situation, and it does happen. And, of course, we're always happy to help people, but typically options are less or more limited, let me say. And I don't always feel like that I'm able to help people in the way that I would prefer. So we really love a four-sided approach years ahead of time with multiple options for exit. And then we can help people realize the value that they have in their company much better. So let's talk just a minute about the ways that you might exit both your business and your real estate. And then I'm going to introduce that, and we're going to get some information from him. So first of all, let's talk about the ways that you might exit your business. So like I said, there will be an exit at some point, whether you plan for it or not. And one of those is just to close the doors and say, well, that was a lot of fun. Had a great run, enjoyed it, and close the doors and, leave employees with no jobs and families with no care. And of course, nobody wants that for you or for them. Again, you've built something special in your company, and it has a life and a value, and to see that go on is definitely everybody's preference. The second one that I have is, and this is often people's dream, is to transition their company to a family member, often the children. And this is a dream that maybe doesn't happen as much as people would like for it to, because often the children just have different interests. Often the children grew up in the environment of the business and see that it's a bit of a challenge and make the decision that that's not their thing. I have seen this done very successfully, and second and third generation, and even fourth generation companies do very well. But a lot of times the children don't have an interest, or they don't have the knack for it like their parents did. So this is a dream that when it works out well is great. But Doesn't always, but it is something a lot of people hope will happen. The next one that I like a lot is to sell to an employee. I like this a lot because employees are what built us, obviously, and to transition your company to someone within your company and give them then the ability to own their own company is very rewarding. The issues with this usually are funding. So you would usually get into a situation where you would fund by a note, financing part of the business price, or maybe even the real estate to this person. Obvious risks are their success and your dependency on that for the value of your business. And then your real estate. And typically I suggest to people that they require that both the business and the real estate transition in this case, just to mitigate your risk. Not that there aren't employees who could do a phenomenal job with your company, but they have not owned a business, and your risk on your real estate would be greater than if it was a larger company. The next thing would be even a little more risky, which would be to transition it to an individual who might want to be in the business but isn't. Again, my suggestion here is, and the challenge there again is funding. My suggestion here is to transition both of your business and your real estate to that person and not maintain the risk associated with someone inexperienced and depend on them for your mortgage payment for your company. Next would be to transition to a local competitor. And I often think this is a good option, especially for smaller schools or schools that might not be the right fit for some reason to a larger company. It makes people nervous because obviously you have to share a good bit of information about your company in order to satisfy that local competitor. And it makes people nervous to share their private information with people that compete with them on a real close by basis. I would go either way with this one, depending on the level of comfort with that person on what you do with your real estate. And then the last option would be, if you're a good fit, there is so much demand right now among the national and regional organizations, and that you guys have been hearing me preach this for a couple of years now. Most of those guys are private equity owned, and the equity game is to grow, grow, grow. So there's a lot of competition for things that they're interested in. Has to be the right market and the right type program, the right real estate. But when you are a good fit for those, I like them the best because they're a good, easy transition, having gone through the process many times. And also it gives you multiple options for what to do with your real estate. Not that there's no risk associated with that, but there is definitely less, because you have a company that you can, if they have multiple schools, they're not as dependent on a single school, and your chances of having an issue with them as a tenant are much less. So those are your options for your business. Now let's talk about your real estate, assuming you own it. If you don't, and you're in the lease situation, then the transition would just be between the landlord of the property and the new business owner. So you might have to participate in that a bit and help with that transition. But this is assuming that you also own your real estate. So one thing for people to think about is that if you're a business owner, your real estate and your business can be managed and transitioned completely separately and with completely different objectives. So they can go together, but they can also be done separately depending on your objectives. So the first one would be transition the real estate along with the business. So like we talked about, especially in a risky situation, you would want to do that, in my opinion. If you had a more stable tenant, then maybe there are multiple options, but the first option is just to sell the real estate with the business. Usually when we get the first call from people that want to do something different with their company, that's their first thought. I really don't want to think about this anymore. I don't want to worry about it. I want the real estate to go, and I want the business to go, and I just want to sell off into the sunset. A lot of times during the process, people start to get a different comfort level with the business owner, and they might change their mind. Also, they get the CPA to do the math on the tax hit that might come along with selling their real estate, and then leasing it as an investment seems a lot more attractive. Which brings us to the next one, which would be to sell the business but keep your real estate and then lease it to a successor organization. And Thad's a great example of that, so we'll get him on the table in just a minute. He can talk about that a little bit. And then the last one would be to keep your business and sell the real estate that it's in. Options for this vary depending on the strength of the business organization. This is also something that Thad has some experience with, and what other people will do at times is to use the capital they have invested in that real estate, sell the real estate, and use that capital to buy another center or multiple businesses, or just use it in a different way. So that is also an option. And the investment toward real estate in our industry is pretty great now as well. And we're seeing the institutional real estate buyers have more interest in doing very creative things with sellers, as well as working with companies that are a bit smaller than we would have seen in the past. So a lot of interest in our industry for both businesses and real estate. So timing is good. Let me tell you a little bit about Thad, and then I'm going to turn it over to him. Thad, are you able to hear me now? I might need to. Yeah, you can hear me, but I can't hear you. So hang on. Let me unmute you. Let's try again.
I hear you.
Yeah. I don't have any sound.
Can you hear me?
Hang on just a second, friends.
Can't hear me.
How would he use his phone?
He's called in, but he's used his phone.
Can anybody in the crowd hear me?
Let me tell you a bit about that while I've got somebody here working on it. This is pretty good. Thad and I have done a lot of work together, and, you know, I think we both would have loved to have been able to mute each other at times. So we got a little, you know, less love thing going on. So Thad, you're still muted, but the crew here is trying to figure it out. So let me tell everyone about, you can correct me later when I don't get it right, but I'll tell you about Thad and his progression through his company. Do you guys need him to do something?
To use his phone.
Use his phone to do what?
To speak. He's logged in on his phone.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Log in on your phone and then speak?
I had just done that. Not working still.
Sorry, we thought we had it figured out here, but we don't.
Is anybody in the? Can we ask anybody that's watching if they can hear me?
Okay, crew's gonna call you, Thad. We'll figure out how to unmute you. And they have a way for you to do it with your phone. So hang on to that thought for a minute, and I'll just talk about him while he's getting that figured out. Just holler when you're ready, Thad. Okay. Hang on just a minute, guys. All right, I'm going to talk about that. So Thad and I met 6 or 7 years ago when we were speaking at a conference in Las Vegas. At that time, Thad was working with an Atlanta-based company after selling his restaurant franchise. And so I love his story. That I just love people's stories anyway. So Thad was a multi-site restaurant owner and sold it because he has 2 young children. And as he says, I wanted to stay married, which is a restaurant. You know, I think their hours are brutal as compared to most people in education. So he sold that and then began to consult with someone. So he's only to have done as much as he has done 6 or 7 years in the industry. He began by consulting with someone to help him with a couple of troubled schools in the Atlanta market. And Thad was immediately able to use some of the marketing ideas and skills that he had in his restaurant franchise and got those. And it was a difficult time, if you guys remember what we were all doing those years ago. But was able to get some pretty quick enrollment back in those schools and was very successful with some of the marketing strategies that he used. And you'll hear more about that because that's his life today. And he's got some interesting things going on there, but was able to be very successful with that. When we met Thad at this conference, we had a group of 6 schools under for sale in the Atlanta market, and they consisted of 2 company-owned and 4 franchise schools. And Thad, I told him about those, of course, and he began the process of looking at them and ended up as the buyer of those 6 schools. After that, another thing that I think he's a master of is pulling together a very strong team, because he had a very strong team of people, and they were able to put in some great programs and processes, and again, were very successful at those schools. Following that, Thad was able to find if someone, so I'm just getting a quick question, again, technicalities. If anyone else can hear Thad, would someone just type it into a question or the chat and let me know if you can hear or not hear Thad. Maybe I'm the only one. But shortly after that, Thad found other opportunities to grow into, but capital was an issue, as it often is in very fast growth like that. So what we did was pull in one of our REIT relationships, which is a real estate investment trust. I mentioned a minute ago that there was a lot of funds available today from the institutional real estate investors, and those are often REITs, and we matched that up with one of those who bought the real estate and put him in several other centers very quickly. And it was a good way for him to take advantage of some of the market opportunities that were going on quickly. Shortly after that, because that's just been almost 2 years since we closed that, he ended up with 12 schools, and within a couple of short months after that, made the decision that timing was right in the market, and timing is everything. I could really talk a lot about timing and how it affects companies. And basically, you can have a very strong company in a great market, and timing can work for or against you depending on what's going on in the buyer companies and in the investment community at that time. So we talk to people a lot about this. There are times when you would have a great opportunity with almost no perceived interest or strong offers just because of something going on internally with the buyer organizations, or the other way around. You've got something that is very specific and might not be a good target for a lot of people, and then there's a specific company who immediately wants what you have. So I say to people a lot of times, what happens is often more dependent on timing and on the buy side than the actual opportunity. So Thad recognized that timing was good, and we listed his company at a pretty healthy number and got it under contract very quickly. Made a couple of people mad because they didn't get the opportunity to look at it, so he was very successful there. Today he has, and this is often one of the many opportunities that people have when they transition their company, that he really enjoyed the development piece of his company. And we've actually done this for multiple sellers, in that if that's their thing that they really like to do, operations can be a lot more challenging, as we know. And to get out of operations and then transition into a development role, we've been able to put together contracts for many of our sellers with the person who bought their company, so that they can then go on and develop for them or others. So that's something that he enjoyed and was very successful at, and has continued to do. He's back.
Right. We're going to try to do it through the phone. He's on speaker.
Okay. So, Thad, would you try to speak?
I'm speaking.
Yay!
Hopefully someone can hear.
Yay!
I'm very sorry if whoever's the technology challenges we have here. We're not running an IT company, obviously.
You know what? I know our clients and friends out there in childcare world very well, and I promise you, you and I are not the only two people who don't do technology well. But thank you for being here. I don't know if you heard any of what I said, but I want to say one more thing.
I heard everything you said.
I just told your whole.
I've been hearing you for hours now while we've been trying to get this working without being able to talk, and that's like impossible.
I know, it really is, and I loved it. I'm going to figure that out more. So let me just say one more thing about that, and then I'm going to ask him to tell his story, and we'll see. You heard the right one, and then you can hear that. I mentioned multiple opportunities in life after the company, and the other thing that I want to say that Thad is doing, and I'd love for you to tell a little bit more about this, Thad, is that he's beginning a branding company, which I'm blown away by, and I've seen a lot in the industry, and so I'd like for you to talk about that too. But I did talk about your story, because it has a lot of relevance to the things that can be done in the industry. And so if you will just, add on to that or say whatever you want to say, and then jump into some of the content we have.
I wonder if, first off, I really don't like seeing my picture on here. I didn't realize how big my forehead is getting. It keeps getting taller and taller, or my hair's getting shorter and shorter. It's one or the other. But anyway, I can't believe how big my forehead is. I'm going to try to look like this. There, you can't tell now. It looks normal, right? Does it look normal to everybody? All right, good.
Perfectly.
Thank you. Well, anyways, hey, thanks for having me today, and I appreciate all of you that joined us and wanted to hear a little bit of the story. But yeah, most of you, most people have been in the childcare industry a lot longer than I was. I was in the restaurant business and had multi-units and sold those back in 2007. And I started with one childcare unit with 40 students in it, licensed for 220. It had 40 in it. It was dying a quick death. It had been open for 3 years. Had 40 kids in 2010, and we added 100 students in less than 6 months. Less than a few years later, it was doing 1.6 million. So in less than 4 years, it went from 300 to 1.6 million. I added 2 more units after year 1. Oh, whoops.
Gotcha.
Don't hear me?
Yeah, we got
Audience question. An audience question came up saying, "Thanks, guys. Not sure why we weren't hearing them." I don't know what that means. But anyways, we added 2 units after year 1. We did a complete rebranding process, remodel and rebranding process. Saw the same kind of success with over 20 and 30% sales increases. A year later, we added the 6 Sunbrook units, which brought me to a total of 9. 2 more years later, we added 2 more to get us to 11, and we added our 12th unit 6 months before we sold. So we went from 1 unit, and 4.5 years later, if we had 12, we went from a $300,000 a year business to $10 million in 4.5 years. So I do a class sometimes called From 0 to 10 million in 4 years, and that's what we had. And all of these were underperforming units and ones that had struggled at times that we were able to rebrand, remodel, and fix our systems to grow our revenue. And real happy this past October we sold them all. I was able to retain the properties at a couple of them, and so that was kind of a quick history. Kind of since then, since the sale in October, we've had a lot of other childcare businesses ask us to come consult with them some on maximizing their profits or readying them to sell, coming up with building remodeling advice, director trainings, operation manual writing. So we kind of ran the gamut with our consulting and development side of our business. And then we found that most of the customers that we were going to visit were asking us mostly about our branding process and the whole remodeling, rebranding our business. And this was something that I kind of specialized in the restaurant business, and then I turned it over to childcare. I did a total of 8 remodels in 4.5 years and rebranding. And we saw an average increase after year 1 of rebranding and remodeling. We saw an average increase of $260,000 in annual revenue at each unit when we did our remodel and rebranding. That's an amazing return. I don't have to tell you, any of you that, but we found out that we had a pretty good specialty in that, and that everybody was asking us for that service. So I immediately assembled a team back in January with signage, design, operations, graphic arts, and IT professionals, and we formed the Better Beans branding company. That's right, it's called Better Beans, and we have quickly signed up our first few clients, and we're kind of booked out for the next 8 months, I guess. So it's been pretty successful. It's a comprehensive brand solution for companies, from design, signage, sales processes, IT, computer, everything from kind of brings we like to say it brings a large company sophistication to small and medium-sized businesses. And that's what we're helping business owners with, since it doesn't seem to be everyone's specialty.
Yeah.
And y'all know how it is. In childcare, every business we walk into, we're seeing construction paper cutout signs, we're seeing handwritten signs, we're seeing basically non-sophistication, things that millennials, kind of turn their noses up at a little bit. We polish that for people, and they immediately see results in their enrollment.
So Thad,
anyway.
Thank you for that. I mean, I love all of the opportunities in the industry for people to do things after childcare, and we'll mention a few more of those in a minute. But talk to us a little bit about, the what I call begin with the end in mind. So obviously, I'm pushy with people about wanting them to start to think about multiple options now. But what things did you do to position your company? And I know you're big on the branding, and you mentioned the tremendous success in the enrollment. What were the things you focused on to maximize your company's value and position it?
Yeah, so for anybody that's looking, and I guess this is the second business, a large business, or large for me businesses that I've sold after I sold my restaurants, and this. And I think first and foremost, for those of you in the childcare business, put the kids first in all your decisions. And I know that's not really a business, it's not going to be some magic formula that I tell you, but, and it's real cliche in business period to think about your customers first, but man, there's nothing more important, or nothing that is more obvious to people when they come to look at your business for possibly buying it. They will know if you're putting kids first, and they will know if you're making good decisions for them every day. And so I just want to say that first. Don't forget that. Secondly, position your company for this is be who you are. Don't try to be everything to everybody. Don't try to be, don't try to be something special that you're not. You are special. So be that. Don't try to be your neighbor, and just do it better than everybody else. What adds value? This is, someone asked a long time ago when you talked about site selection, and I did a site selection class not too long ago, how to find a great childcare site. And a realtor will tell you it's, there's 3 keys to finding a great site, and they say location, location, location. Well, in childcare, for me, in building your business to sell, it's three things. It's enrollment, 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 right? It's top line, top line, top line, sales, sales, sales. Do not spend your time trying to figure out how many, cups you bought last month, or that is not going to increase your value. Your value is all in enrollment, because most of the people that are going to acquire you are going to be bigger than you are. And if they're bigger than you are, they already know what kind of costs they can cut and have. And they'll do it better than you do it, because you're saving, a ream of copy paper doesn't mean a thing to them. Those $3 doesn't mean anything. So what does mean something is that you're at 95% capacity and you're charging the top rate in your market. That means something. So, and there's only two ways to build revenue, right? There's only two ways to build sales and build your top line, and that's to build enrollment, one. And when they're there, get them to spend more money. So fill your building up, and once it's full, you raise prices, and you keep raising prices, and keep increasing your offerings and staying full while you're increasing your price. And you will see not only money pour down to the bottom line for you, but you'll see the value of your company for the people looking at it grow. But you have to build sales. That's it. Build sales. Did that answer your question, Kevin?
Yeah, that's fabulous. I love that. And, I love that you threw tuition rates in there, because I typically get preachy about that. You just saved me from doing it this time. So thanks a lot for that. Really helpful.
You did one other thing. I'm sorry, Kathy. You've been talking a long time. I was muted. On the expense line, I do not want anybody to focus on their expenses in building value, but I will say this. You need to have your financial house in order, meaning you need to be running monthly or, 28-day P&Ls and financials. Your balance sheet always needs to be updated. Your financials and P&Ls need to be updated. And what I think companies want to see is consistent expenses. They don't want to see that you spent $3,500 on supplies this month and $12 next month. They want to know that they can count on what you have. They want to see that you spent $600 every month. They want to see that you spent $2,500 on food every month. They want to see consistent, and that speaks to how well you operate. If people that are operating from their hip and shooting from the hip are spending a lot one month and not spending for 6 months. People that have their financial house in order are spending it as they go, and they're tracking their expenses, and it's very consistent. And when companies come in to buy you and they see that consistency on the P&Ls, they trust your financial. When they trust your financial, you're going to get a bigger number for your business.
It's almost like I fed you the questions.
We've been working together for a while.
I know. Thank you. That was awesome. Okay, so talk to us then a bit about the exit process. And of course, when I say exit, I'm talking about operational exit, which is where most of the people are that we have in our attendance today, because again, there are multiple things to exit toward. But talk to us about how that process works, how it went for you, whatever's relevant in your mind.
Are you noticing how big my forehead is? I mean, my God.
It's all the brains up there, then.
It's bothering me. Anyway, you got bangs, Kathy. We can't tell how big your forehead is. Show us your forehead.
Yes, sir.
Show us your forehead. Ooh, there we go. All right. What was your question?
Talk to us about your process. Talk to us about your process.
So, first thing I think is important about your exit process, I'll say it before anything, is that you need to have your management team ready to impress. Which means if you don't have a good director or area director, regional manager, whatever your senior level manager is, if your management team is not impressive and not ready, nobody's going to want to buy you, because most of the buyers are coming from outside, and what they want to know is that the management team is there, in place, and competent. And so make sure, first and foremost, that your team is solid. If you don't have a solid team in place, you really probably shouldn't be selling yet. Make sure you have someone ready that they can say, that they don't have to worry about when they purchase your business. That's one. Secondly, you've got to assemble some professionals, experienced professionals, to handle your sale. You are not equipped to handle your sale, period. So you need an experienced accountant, an experienced attorney, and you better daggum have a good broker, period. If you don't have those three things, and they're not all deal makers, meaning an attorney that's not trying to stop your deal, an accountant that takes 5 days to get back to you, they need to be deal makers that help you on the spot. So if you can find those three professionals, a banker, an accountant, an attorney, a broker, an accountant, an attorney, you're going to be behind. So I think those are the first two things that you need to have in place to start getting ready for your exit process. Once you have that, your broker should be taking care of the sale, right? So Kathy's a broker. She's the best in the business. This isn't an advertising pitch for her, but I'll tell you that if you're getting ready to sell your business, she's the one that needs to list your business. But look, now it's her job to go out and find the people to buy your business. You don't need to be searching for, Aunt Edna. And to be honest with you, even if you want to sell to Aunt Edna or your sister or somebody that wants to take over the business, you're better off using a broker, because at the end of the day, the idea when you sell your business is to get as much money as possible out of it. You put up all the equity to get it started. You put all the work. You put it all in it. Now it's time to get as much money as possible out of it. So to do that, you need to have a broker to get you the most money. For sale by owner will not get you the most money. So don't even go into that way. They'll find you the person. One thing, Kathy, and you can tell me if you don't agree, in my opinion, when you go to sell a company, nobody in your organization should know about it except for you. It is so important that your company continues to operate in a way that's still going to grow it, regardless if you're for sale. And I say that to also add this. Even if you're for sale, do not stop spending money to grow your business. If you stop spending money, you're like, well, I'm going to be for sale. It is going to cost you money. Keep operating every day like you've got to enroll that next kid, like your teachers have to have this in place. You got to keep operating like normal. So for everyone to operate like normal, you have to be 100% confidential. I would let no one in on it. I didn't let anyone in on it. I was under contract and doing due diligence for, 6 months, Kathy? 6.5 months?
Yeah.
March to
October.
October. That's 5 months, 6 months, whatever. And I did not tell even my senior man, my right hand and partner, who had a small percentage of my company. He did not know until 3 weeks ahead of time, 3 weeks before closing. And that's to protect them as well. So keep it confidential. Once you get that and you have the right offer come in, let me say this too. You said it earlier, Kathy, I'm sorry, so I want to say it again. Look to sell your company when things are going great. Listen, people, I tell you what, one of the most popular questions I get when I run into people in the industry right now is they ask me, hey, Thad, are you happy you sold? Are you happy? And you know what my answer is every day? I don't know. Some days I'm real happy. Some days I really miss it. And we were doing really well when I sold. Really well. That's to be honest. But if I would have waited until I was miserable, I wouldn't have gotten, I'll say this the right way, I wouldn't have gotten paid like I've got paid on this one. Because if you're miserable, your business is probably doing miserable. So I got out. I feel good about when I got out this time, quite frankly, because I still miss it. I still love it. I'm still on fire for it. I still talk to my old directors weekly. I still talk to all my senior and regional managers every couple days. I still miss it. I still hunger for it. But that's because I got out at the right time. If I'd have gotten out at the wrong time, I wouldn't have got paid as much. When things are going good, that's when you need to be thinking about it. I'll just give you that little piece of advice. Anyways, so once they find the right buyer and we've negotiated and we come up with the right price, they'll start doing all their due diligence, and that's the part that really stinks. But it's the part that's necessary. They're going to dig apart, and they're going to look at everything you've spent money on. They're going to look at every piece of financial history you've had. That's also why I said earlier, get your financial house in order now, because if you don't, the due diligence process will be miserable, and some of them will probably give up if you haven't done a good enough job to keep it up with things. And lastly, once you know it's a done deal and you're down to the last week or so, it's probably time to start communicating to your team. Then when the sale goes through, you get to say goodbye to everybody, and that is by far the worst part.
Yeah.
And, unless they hate you, right?
It's tough. Always tough.
The people that love you, it makes it really tough. The people you love, it makes it really tough. But, in the end, the idea of business is there has to be an end. I think Kathy said it good in the beginning. There has to be an end. You need it to end on your terms. And if you wait too long, it's going to end on someone else's terms.
Well said. Thank you. Yeah. What you hit on last is the thing that keeps me only in this industry, is that it is always difficult for people. And because of the people issue, they always have mixed feelings, and it's a tough transition. I'm real honest with people about that. So appreciate you chiming in on that. I think we're going to we've got a couple of questions coming in. So I'll hit you with them in just a minute. A couple of comments. I agree with everything Thad said there. I don't think there's any part of what he said that I would add to or change. And of course, he's personally been through it. So that's much appreciated. Some of the creative things that, and I mentioned Thad's branding company in addition to development. So often, we do have people who transition well into full-blown retirement, and they've thought about that and planned for it and do it well. There are a good many people who want to transition out of operations, which I've done personally, Thad's done personally, you all are doing now, and I have a lot of respect for you still doing it now, because that's about the hardest work I ever did. So, but there's some other ways to transition into using your knowledge and experience in the industry into continuing without being in operation. So development's a popular one. A lot of people that we work with were originally developers or builders, and they transition into just that part of the business. We do have some people who have moved into roles as trainers. I've got one that moved into a role as the president of her state's child care organization, which has just been a fabulous fit, because who better to know the industry and support the people in their organization. And it's one of the best. It's North Carolina, if you're there, and it's one of the country's best run state organizations that I'm associated with. And that's a great one. And then, we have people do other things in real estate that might not be attached to our industry, but know and learn real estate well and might want to go and do work in that area. So those are just some ways that are really good to transition. So we got a couple of questions here, and that a couple of them are for you, so don't go anywhere. I see you starting to do your work over there. So I've got one here for you. What was the biggest challenge you faced during the sales process?
Did you see me doing work for real?
I did. Caught you.
Can you see what I'm writing on? Can you see what I'm doing?
No, we just see your big forehead.
Oh my gosh.
Biggest challenge.
Now. What was my what?
Biggest challenge during the sales process?
Biggest challenge in my sales process was kind of, it was twofold. Number one, it was kind of not telling people in my organization, especially the people you normally count on to vent to and things like that. But that was also solved a little bit by having a great broker partner that I was able to vent to, vent frustrations and move on. But there was also the second biggest one was the whole due diligence process. I mean, so we had kind of 12 moving entities that all had to be audited. So we went through a full, and we were a little, medium-sized childcare company. So we went through a full financial audit at a CPA's office that took, well, it was 2-day audit. 2 days of asking lots of questions that were irrelevant and people that didn't know anything about the childcare industry that were picking apart numbers that they didn't know how to pick apart. That was probably my most frustrating part, but we made it through that. And they tried to battle back and change our price and everything else, and we held strong and still won, and it was good.
Yeah, so I like to piggyback on a couple of things that you said. As far as notifying your staff, that was a great answer for you to wait until a couple of weeks ahead of time. I do see some varying feelings about that. So I do have some sellers who choose to tell at least 1 or 2 trusted people earlier in the process. I think the benefits of that are that they can help you with the process. The negatives are that they will worry. And anything unknown, that relates to that big a part of their life is scary. And the unknown is always worse than the actual situation when it gets done. So that's what you have to deal with there. But I do see people make different decisions about how they do that. I'm a big believer in, and most of the larger companies will want to talk to people before closing. And the main reason for that, well, there are a couple. So they want them to be a part of the process, to get the opportunity to get their questions answered, and also to be sure that they have all the technicalities like licensing and benefits all taken care of. Licensing requirements for their staff and benefits and payroll all in order before the closing. So I'm a big believer. And I'm sorry, jump in.
Yeah. So remember one point that I made that we kind of changed that because that was always your advice. They're going to want to talk to them early. And you're right. The buyer is going to want to talk to everybody. You think about it. If you were buying something, you would want to talk to everybody. But that doesn't mean you have to give in. And if you remember on my sale in particular, there was no earnest money put up, right? And so there was no hard money. So if they talked to everybody and everybody wanted to bail out on you and then the buyer backed out, everybody knew you were for sale and it's too late to change that, right? So I would personally not let them talk to anybody and hold strong unless there's money that's hard, like a lot of money that's hard.
Okay, good point. Good point. Okay, thanks.
We had to fight our buyers on that. Remember, we fought.
Yeah, I conveniently forget all those bad parts of it. The second thing I wanted to mention to piggyback on what Thad said, and Thad and his forehead are gone now, so I don't know where he got tired of us, is the diligence process that Thad mentioned. I do warn people that the diligence process is going to be not the funnest thing that you've ever done. You will see a wide range of required diligence information depending on who the buyer is, and also depending on the size of your company. So Thad's company was sizable enough that the buyer hired an outside CPA firm to practically do an audit. You got to be pretty sizable for that to happen. Most of the companies would have their internal financial CFO or whoever that person is, their internal team review numbers. And then again, I get diligence lists. Literally, one of the national buyers' diligence list is 1 page, and some of them are 40 pages. So, there's just a very wide range. And this is where it's helpful for us to know in advance and be able to tell you before you make a decision on the buyer, here's what you'll like and here's what you want, because the process can be pretty drastically different depending on who that person is. I think we had another question for you, Thad. Let's see if I can pull it back up.
He answered it.
I think maybe they're saying maybe you answered it without it. The best time to sell. what would be the best time to sell. So you talked about when your company is performing well. Also, we get the question a lot about what time of year you should consider, and that I'll give you the chance to piggyback on this as well. What sort of naturally happens in the industry, because a lot of people don't feel completely comfortable about their numbers until they've had their year-end CPA review or tax return. So we typically will get numbers for valuation from people after the first of the year. They're listing in the spring, they're starting to show their company in the summer, they get it under contract, and people want to close in the fall. So it sort of happens that way a lot of the time just because of information flow. We do like to stay away from normal transition times because there's so much else going on in the school. So you really want to stay away from the start of school. You want to stay away from August if you can, go middle September to the end of October. Most people will completely stay away from Thanksgiving to Christmas. And the main reason for that, of course, you will have people on vacation and holiday, but the other thing is that licensing just goes completely away over the holiday. So to try to find people in licensing is tricky during that time. And then you really want to stay away from the end of school, the May month, because it's a crazy month, as we know. So another question for you, Thad. Did your buyer keep the name of the school or change it?
So my buyer kept the names of the schools. They have look, a lot of what they're buying, especially if they're buying performing assets, they're not going to want to change the name of the school of a performing asset, because that could just change the dynamic of the building and the perception of how good the building is. So especially in my case, we had already rebranded, we had remodeled. If anything, they were going to change the name of some of their schools.
Right. So in Thad's case, and we do see both happen, that sometimes they will maintain the name and sometimes they'll change the name. In Thad's case, it was a national company, but they were new in the Atlanta market. So they had no brand recognition, and they wanted to continue the strong reputation that Thad had already built there. In some cases, they already operate in a certain market and they want to capitalize on the brand that they've already built in that market, and they will change the name. So there are, that decision's really made on an individual basis based on what is the healthiest. If there's a name change, most of the time they'll ask for the right to use your name for a certain amount of time just for a transition. And what they'll do is take 6 months to a year, and they'll get to know people. They'll be sure that people are comfortable, and they'll begin with a new name. Like they'll keep, so Thad's company was Sunbrook. They might, if they're ABC, they might say Sunbrook and ABC Company for a certain amount of time, and then transition to ABC. So often the names are used together for a while, and then it's not so shocking to people when they change names and they're not quite as concerned about it. So we do see different things there. So I got a question for you. Let's see what this question is. I enjoy developing and then stabilizing new centers, but hate operations. Boy, do I hear that a lot. I have 2 centers. Now have ideas and potential clients for others, but other than equity on the center I own, where else do I need to get funds? But more other than equity on the center I own, where else do I need to get funds to grow? Okay, where else can funds be gained? And Thad, you can jump in on this as well. So equity in your current building is a good place to go. So there are a couple of ways. You can, if you don't go the route of using real estate or a real estate partner and you need financing, SBA is typically the way to go. Most people will go to an SBA lender. The beauty of SBA is that you'll have to put less down so you can preserve cash. The minus of it is it's a royal pain because they require so much information, although honestly, traditional lenders now do as well. So SBA is a good route for both real estate and business. You could always consider growth by going into a property that you might lease. So that preserves capital, and you can have someone else own the real estate, maybe get the opportunity to buy it later. You can always bring partners in who have funds if you need cash for growth. Of course, the trade-off there is the more you give up, the less in control you are. So, and same thing with your real estate. If you lease property from someone else, you don't control it, they do. So as you grow, there's usually a natural trade-off between funds and how much control you have. So Thad, you want to add anything to that? Have any other ideas?
Yeah. Number one is be very creative and don't be shut off to anything. So the ways to get funds, especially when you have two, as she mentioned, we grew on multiple fronts. We had some owner financing of things we acquired. We had conventional bank loans. We had SBA bank loans. We had SBA 504 loans. We had 7A loans. We had properties that we sold to a leasing company and was able to cash out and use that cash to acquire new businesses. Really, there are countless ways. If you want to grow and if you have a successful business and you want to grow, there is capital out there for you. You can't be intimidated by it. You need to find someone. Heck, you can call me. I can help you find people to help you find financing. There are lots of ways that you can go about it. I used Kathy to help me find some partners, some leaseback company partners. We had, there's a million ways to skin this cat. So, if you have a successful business, don't let capital get in your way, because if your business is successful, then you're good. Now, if you're just trying to grow, like having a baby to save a marriage, that ain't going to work. If you're trying to grow to save your company, that won't work. But if you are already have a successful company and are looking to grow, then there's capital out there for you. Just be willing to be creative and find someone to help you walk you through the process.
Great. Thank you. I got one more question here, and then I'm going to wrap us up because we're almost at 2:00, and I know you guys have children waking up from that. The question came in about whether companies were interested in buying capital stock or just assets. So those are
Kathy,
yes,
Kathy,
yes.
You said something about the kids going down from a nap. You do understand that I take my naps now that I've sold it too, right?
You got that little pallet on the floor, don't you? That you are going to make everyone so jealous right now.
Oh, I have pajama bottoms on right now. I put on a collared shirt. I haven't done that in a while, and I got slippers and pajama bottoms on. Anyway, I'm sorry. That was a serious question there. I apologize.
That was great. That was just a good segue into the next slide. Okay, so do companies want to buy stock or just assets? Good question. Those are the two ways to sell a company. A company can either purchase and assume your stock, which means all of the assets and liabilities come along with it, or they can buy just select assets of your company. What happens almost all the time in our industry is that people buy select assets. So they buy the hard assets, the equipment, the vehicles, the furniture and fixtures, and the goodwill, which is basically the revenue stream that you've built. They don't purchase the cash or the accounts receivable, which stay with the seller. They also don't purchase the liabilities, and the reason for that is that would make them immediately responsible for everything that had ever happened in your school up until that point. So as an example, a family could come forward the day after closing and say there was a accident in the school 5 years ago and we're suing you for that, and they would then be the people responsible because they purchased the stock and therefore the liability. So that doesn't usually happen in our industry. There are tax ramifications to both, and I usually tell people to plan on an asset sale, and that's what they should talk to their CPA about. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up a little bit now. I want to, first of all, tell you about the next 2 webinars. You guys can access this one or any others on our website. They're recorded. You can go back and watch them. You will get a survey asking for your input on this one. We really appreciate it if you would let us know what you thought about it, what other things we can do that would be of value. We know that financial information is sparse in our industry, so we like to bring good value to you that way. The next 2 webinars are going to be a 2-part series on the transition, and we're going to get more specifically into how a process would go if you were going to transition your company. So we're going to talk very specifically about how it works, what things to do and not do, what to look out for and what to expect. And so the first of those 2 is on September 22nd. Again, we'll stick with our Eastern 1 to 2 o'clock time frame. If anyone has suggestions for change there, let us know. Thad, I would like to thank you for giving us your time today and your brain space and sharing your story and all of your success, and couldn't be happier for you there.
Thanks for Kathy, and thanks to all y'all for listening up. Kathy, give them my email address in case they need to get in touch with me for any reason. That'd be great.
Please, if you heard anything from Thad, that you think he can support you on, shoot me an email. I'm happy to get you in touch with him. I think he's got some interesting things going on in the industry right now.
Adios. Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.